Climate change, the defining issue of our time, and Southeast Asia is one of the most vulnerable to its impacts. Indeed, there is an urgent need to help people navigate the complexity of climate change. And what better way to do that than storytelling? Join us as we break down how to tell stories that don't only inform but also move people to action. This is Through the Climate Lens, a conference on climate storytelling in Southeast Asia.
Thank you for joining the first session of Through the Climate Lens, a conference on climate storytelling in Southeast Asia. I'm Ushar Daniele. I'm an independent host from Malaysia and a fellow Climate Tracker Asia. I'm a fellow with the Climate Tracker Asia. Climate Tracker is a non-profit journalism organization that supports and promotes amazing climate reporting. Today, we will be discussing the challenges and opportunities in climate change journalism in the region. And I'm joined by Imelda Abano, who is the Earth Journalism Network Senior Content Coordinator for the Philippines and the Pacific, and she'll be joining us slightly later. And also with me today is Hari Surjadi, who is the Southeast Asia Coordinator for Pulitzer Center's Rainforest Journalism Fund. Napat Shatar, a photo and video journalist and a filmmaker from Thailand, and of course, Biena Magbitang, who is the Climate Tracker Asia's Regional Director. The format of this session is a panel discussion, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of discussion. So please type your questions in the chat window and we'll address them during the Q&A part. By the end of our time today, we hope that you've learned a thing or two about writing better and impactful stories about climate change. To get this conversation started, I'd like to ask Imelda about the state of climate change reporting in Southeast Asia. How is the current climate coverage different from 5 to 10 years ago?
I think Imelda is having issues with her data, so maybe I think I cannot answer that question because I've only been a journalist for 10 years now. But I guess if I can give my 2 cents, basically when I was starting on doing climate change reporting, it's more of like reporting on science. It's more of reporting on the technicalities of what climate is, climate change is. But right now there's more and more emphasis on putting on a human face to your story, making it more a human story as opposed to a sciencey story. And I think Harry would agree because he is a seasoned reporter.
Okay, I'll move on to my question for Harry. How do you assess the quality of climate stories being produced in the last 2 to 3 years?
Thank you, Ushar. Yes, based on my experience, I do reporting climate change even before the COP first in early 90s, and I went to the COP first, and then the big one COP is the Kyoto COP. At that time, earlier, the report on climate change is some reporter made some mistakes. They don't really understand what is climate change because this is something new for most of the journalists, especially in developing countries. And now I can say the report is getting better, although some very basic approach is still the same. For example, most of journalists approach the climate change story as a science reporting. They interview scientists more than people because they probably just start the reporting. They would like to know and to understand the climate change issues. What is the climate change? So they interview more scientists, and some of them are also activists because they louder than the scientists. And some of the scientists, some of the activists, they are also scientists as a PhD degree and or master degree on the science. And the second similar approach still applied. All the story event driven. When there is an event or some events, for example, the typhoon or flood, and news everywhere talking about climate change or related to climate change. And that's how there is the approach. And the third thing that similar approach is journalists like numbers. So they're reporting numbers a lot, statistics, numbers. To that, I suggest the media to start to create a channel, an open access to citizens who can submit report, video, or text, or photos. It's about climate change in their mind. They kind of a citizen who monitor the climate change effect or impact. And tomorrow I will do a training workshop for citizens. Most of them are a university student on citizen journalism and citizen science. They will monitor the indicators of climate change and indicators that related to food. It's about food security. And I think we have to move from that typical approach, how reporters report the climate change. We have to move to give faces, more people, general people interview than scientists, how they think, how they cope with this impact of climate change, and how they daily activities changing. That's the stories that I would like to see more from now. That's my some of ideas about reporting climate change now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harry. I believe Imelda has joined us for this session, and I would like to ask the question to Imelda again. Hello, Imelda. Welcome. My first question would be, how has the state of climate change reporting changed over the years? How is the current climate coverage different from 5 to 10 years ago?
Okay. Thank you, Ushar. Can you hear me well? I'm sorry. I'm struggling with, technical issues here. But anyway, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. And well, I'm a big fan of Harry. I learned a lot from him. He's a good friend of mine. His passion on science and environmental journalism is contagious. He's a good mentor to most young environment and science journalists. For your question, Ushar, for me, as an environmental journalist and a media trainer for over 20 years, one thing is clear. This new era in climate change reporting brings a set of new questions for the journalism community. How can we best report on the issue? How can journalists help the audience understand the urgency and complexity of the situation? And of course, how can we best collaborate to infuse climate coverage in all aspects of news reporting? So 5-10 years, if you ask me about the difference, I think the mission is still the same, except that, of course, more and more journalists are leveling up their reporting in terms of tools being used in reporting, like the use of multimedia, drones, graphics, animation, mapping, among other interactive reporting techniques. So stories now are more in-depth, I believe, and more localized. And I think the sense of reporting right now is still the same mission that we have, like reporting on environment and climate crisis is a chance for us, of course, to bring these issues to a wider audience and potentially infuse or influence individuals and policymakers. It's also an opportunity for us to share solutions and profile of people taking action to protect the planet and its inhabitant. Of course, journalism and great climate reporting can the same. One, draw attention to potential local and global solutions to these problems. So we are seeing more and more reports on global solutions. Of course, we are still informing public discourse on bringing the latest scientific data and research to audiences in a timely and accurate and accessible formats, like what Harry have said. Our mission still is to educate audiences about pressing environmental issues and make an overwhelming topic on relatable and comprehensible issues. So we play really a vital role in a sense of hope and what call urgency and spurring the collective action required to tackle a challenge of this and important scale. So I think if we are looking at the difference on climate, on environmental reporting, we are leveling up and we are understanding the issues more right now, and we have more localized reporting.
Thank you. Very
I
well.
hope that makes sense.
Yes, it was very well put. And I think with Imelda and Harry's answer, I would like to pose our next question to Biena, because we know that Climate Tracker trains young journalists and advocates to tell better stories about climate change. And from Harry and Imelda, we understand that reporting has changed so much over the years. So what are the top challenges that were faced by Climate Tracker fellows?
I think I can summarize my answer with just 2 words: time and support. While we can feel the enthusiasm among journalists to embark on climate reporting, most of them have other stories to follow. As you know, like you, Ushar, you've been following the Malaysian elections. There are so many things clouding the news headlines. So time has always been a problem, and also, and as you know, climate change reporting is not a one and done story. You cannot end your day and say, like, write a story. You have to follow it. There has to be endurance. There has to be resilience when you're doing a climate story, because you have to get all the sides. And sometimes editors don't really understand that. So we don't really get that much support that we actually need, because we need more time to follow a story. I can say we even had a fellow before. Her story is really good, but the editors are kind of like an offense on if they will allow this person to travel far for this story. But I am very hopeful right now that more and more editors are seeing the importance of climate reporting, especially here in Southeast Asia. I can see more and more newsrooms opening up their own climate bureau, so to speak. But I guess that will always be the challenge that we have to face, as Ate Aimia said a while ago, as media trainers, that we have to be always supportive of the timings and be always supportive of how they will be able to finish a story, because there are so many things in if like it's a soup box. There are so many things in it. Like you for you to be able to finish a climate story, you kind of like have to think if the story will be political, the story will be how will I be able to translate it in a human face. So I guess that's where the challenge is. But for more and more, I'm very, very optimistic that more and more people will actually understand that this stories has to be put out, especially for us global South nations.
Thank you, Biena. I have an additional question as a follow-up from what you just said. Given that reporters have a understanding of the importance of reporting climate change stories, but the desk is not so open to it, do you think that there should be more training for editors and newsrooms to understand the importance of climate reporting in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I will be I'm actually happy to say that we've been starting doing that since last year. We are trying to kind of like link up reporters and editors for them to be able to appreciate what climate reporting is. Why is it important that climate stories are in the headlines? Why is it important that your reporters are working on climate stories? But I guess sometimes with the shrinking budget of newsrooms in Southeast Asia, the kind of democracy that we have right now, I guess there are so many things that they are prioritizing first than climate stories, and that's the sad reality. I know Harry and Imelda will definitely like agree that there are so many people who would like to do it. There are so many others who would like to participate, but sometimes their hands are tied because there are so many factors that are going into, will we do a climate story when we know that sometimes you are actually tackling and working against, say, a big company in your country, or say a powerful person. So it really just doesn't take a simple yes, but some sort of calculation.
All right, thank you very much for that insight, Biena. And now we'll move on to Napat from Thailand. Kun Napat, how are you? My question for you for today is, given that we have text reporters is just words, and when it's just all words, no one really wants to read it all. So do explain to us, what is the importance of visuals in climate reporting?
All right, thank you very much. That's a very good question. Because my background, I was a photojournalist, and my goal is to translate like academic text or like the report into like visual that's compelling the people. That's very challenging for me in the past few years, because like in the past people tend not to like understand or interested in the climate change issue, but like after the thing change, like like social media, and people tend to like want to see more about the issue, what is happening. So it's my goal like to show what is happening in my home country. So let's say okay, let's say about my previous work. Shall we like travel to the southern part of my home country, where it's like directly affected by the climate change? Because when the climate change happened in Thailand, so if it's not happening in Bangkok, like people are not gonna interested at all. But if it happened in Bangkok, they gonna have a lot of new reporting. But now it's like things change. Like let's say like I want to show like how the local artisanal fishing community or coastal communities, which is one of the most like community that's facing climate change and considered as the vulnerable groups. And my goal is to document those vulnerable groups and create climate change related story in order to like to show like this is real and it's happening right now. Shall we go to next slide? So as you know, like fish is very like a vital source of food for people, providing like animal protein across the country. And most of them are caught by additional fishing communities. However, due to like new technology in the past, like touring method provided by the rest of the country back in 1960, the fish population continuously decreased, known as overfishing. Although the Thai government has changed its regulation in 2015, the problem still continues. And climate change, next slide, please. Climate change is another challenge local fishers faced, not just only for the previous fish stock depletion, but also like causing ocean acidification, unpredictable weather, rapid flood, and erosion. Next. Let's see, like this, for example, is in the southern part of Thailand. This is the day after the storm. Because of the flood in the city, contaminated fresh water was rapidly and directly released into the sea. And the color is really black. So why is black? Next, because the water was contaminated in the unregulated landfill. Next slide, please. Yeah, the water was contaminated by the unregulated landfill the day the storm comes. Next, please. And this is the second largest landfill in Thailand. We still have like unregulated landfills for over 3,000 across the country. So let's zoom out, and when I cover the story about the climate change, I try to look for another layer of narrative to add more depth into my story, because I don't want to just like show the climate change aspect, but I want to show that another environmental issues also related to the climate change as well, and especially like the human context. Next, please. Like for this, I would like to show how the unexpected storm affect the community. As we can see, like that the storm doesn't just only submerge the community and their home, but also affect a regulated landfill, which makes the situation even worse. Okay, next, please. Okay, let's step further south to Jana district, Songkhla province. This story of LNG expansion, this is the story I was covering as a climate tracker fellow. In this area, most of the residents are rubber farmers and artisanal fishers, as people have been doing for generations. However, it has been over 2 decades since the government first raised the idea of transforming this area into an industrial zone. As you can see, the construction of the Trans-Thailand-Malaysia gas pipeline behind the community, which is built back in 20 years ago, 2003. Next slide, please. Like in 2019, the government has planned to transform this area, and all of the community is gonna be demolished. The area is gonna be totally changed. Not just only the changing climate that they have to face, the community have to face, but as you can see, our environmental issues are also related. So this is like my goal that I want to show my climate change story. Next, please. And as you can know, the rising temperature not only affect the community, but also the life underwater as well. Next slide, please. The coral reef is known as a home for a lot of marine species, and it's now facing the rising temperature that cause bleaching. So I want to add another layer, not just the community but I also want to collaborate with another NGO and scientists as well in order to provide the accurate facts as much as possible, but keep it compelling way. Next slide, please. Sudden rises in temperature, and acidification and lead to the loss of marine habitats and species. Shifting ocean currents and warming water are changing the distribution of fish stock and altering the structure of ecosystems. Okay, and here we come to the last slide. Next, please. Having fewer homes means having fewer fish for local artisanal fishing communities, which eventually affects food security across the country. As I said, like local fisher like provide like almost 50% of like fish to across the country. As I mentioned earlier, that it's very vital source of protein for Thai people. And this is how I tell the climate story through my lens. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your views and your coverage in Thailand, Napat. Can I add on one question for you? From your years being a climate photojournalist, could you share with us which assignment or which photograph that impacted you the most, that made you want to make more changes and report more on climate change in Thailand?
Oh, actually, that's a lot. But let's say like the photo of the in the southern part of Thailand, when they cover about the flood story that I like mentioned earlier, because it's not just really the climate change, but also the unregulated landfill. You know, like the community has to stay there for over like since they're born. So like, and this problem is still untold until I report this story and like I publish on the national media. And we just know like, oh, we have a lot like, we have around like 3,000 unregulated landfills across the country. And this is just only one example. So just landfill alone is pretty bad for like the community, but climate change that brings, you know, like unpredicted, unexpected storm, that like the rain go to landfill and water like go to like the community, so it's make it even worse. So I want to like report this story and like want to urge the government to do something as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your personal experience, Napat. Given that I'm a freelance journalist, I not only write for agencies, but I also produce television news and I take photographs on my own. So why is it so important to include visuals and multimedia into climate change reporting? Because I think it stands alone. A picture says 1,000 words. You can write 1,000 words and sometimes it would not make sense if it doesn't have an accompanying picture that explains the entire situation in just one photograph. So with television and with photographs taken, you're able to then connect the words that you read inside the story with the photograph because it's definitely connected. And with television, especially when I'm producing for agencies like television packages, it is very important that we show and be at the location where the people are most impacted and the most affected, because there is no point interviewing someone who is not impacted, who may have a lot to say because they will not be able to share the actual realities on the ground. So I'd like to thank you, Napat, for being a great photojournalist, being on the ground, going out there and getting really amazing photographs. And I have a special interest in artisanal fisheries, so I'll be in touch with you for a story, possibly. It is absolutely an amazing conversation with all our speakers, Imelda, Harry, Biena, and Napat. And we are seeing a lot of compelling stories about the realities faced by climate vulnerable communities, as well as solutions to the problem, as more journalists, regardless of beats, report on climate change. What are the tools and technique to better tell the climate story? And I open this question to all four of our speakers, Imelda, Harry, Biena, and Napat, to share with us what are the tools and techniques to better tell climate stories in Southeast Asia. I think we can start with Biena.
I will defer to what you said a while ago. You wanted to collaborate with the PAC. And I think that's one of the tools that we're all always promoting, collaborative journalism. And we're and allow me to thank the Pulitzer Center, Harry here, for being able to supporting us when we embarked on a collaborative journalism project before. I guess it's not trailblazing or something very technical, but it's something very useful, because in doing a collaborative journalism story, you will see not just one side of the story, but basically like how how this story or how this theme or topic is shaping different nations. Like what you said a while ago, you wanted to write stories on artisanal fishing. Napat is also concerned about marine ecosystems and biodiversity, and that will definitely like produce a very rich story if we will see a collaboration between a Malaysian journalist and a Thai journalist. And it's something that's exciting. It's something new. It's something not that's why I allow me to allow me to also promote one of our talks later in Twitter Spaces, wherein we will share to you why is it important, why we think the collaborative journalism is the future of climate change reporting right now. Because as you know, and as we talked about this morning, climate change does not affect just one nation; it affects us all. And I guess if we foster more collaboration, rich journalist to journalist, then we will see more rich stories. We will see more compelling stories in the future.
Thank you, Biena. We will move on to Imelda now for this answer.
Yeah, I mentioned a while ago that there are a lot of interactive tools that can be used in reporting. I think what's more important, apart from, of course, using multimedia, drones, graphics, animation, mapping, etc. What's more important, I think, is the depth and localization of stories, like keeping the stories more local. We need to stress the need for stories that show local impacts on people's lives. And of course, like what our panelists have said, to tell human interest stories, like telling individual stories in powerful ways with the use of maybe tools or techniques on reporting or interactive tools. Highlighting solutions, one, not just reporting on catastrophe, reporting that emphasizes the negative impacts can cause audiences to feel helpless in the face of climate change, for instance. I think there are tools that are really useful for reporting, not just on environment, not just on climate change issues, but it's more important that we need to make our stories more in depth, because I'm also aware, though, that the realities of climate change reporting, we need to see more space allotted to climate or environment related stories as well. We need more backing from our editors, resources and time, if you may. A training of trainers might help in order for journalists and editors to increase their knowledge and strengthen their reporting. So we need to focus more, not just on tools, but maybe more on training, on exploring environmental angles and humanizing the stories by maybe including marginalized sectors like the women, indigenous peoples, and the youth. Ushar, if I may, just promote Earth Journalism Network. So we, of course, help journalists from Asia or from developing countries, improve or strengthen their environmental reporting, not just giving tools or reporting tools. Our mission is really to improve the quality and quantity of environmental journalism worldwide. So the Internews Earth Journalism has been a project really of Internews since 2004. And our network currently has over 15,000 journalist members from more than 180 countries. So we build the capacity of environmental journalism worldwide through workshops, trainings, fellowship programs, and support, of course, for story production and distribution. So we have a dedicated website at earthjournalism.net. So we can help improve or strengthen reporting through the use of maybe reporting tools or interactive tools in reporting environment or climate change. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Imelda. And let's move on to Harry for the answer where what are the tools and techniques to better tell climate stories before we end with Napat.
Thank you, Ushar. To think, first, it depends on who is our target audiences. And I think media should target youth more because they will experiencing more impact of climate change. So we should target youth more. Then the tools for youth is video, or as Imelda said, interactive kind of storytelling with games, that kind of approach tools that probably work for youth. The second thing is collaboration. Yes, most of the time we reporter doing the field reporting is only 10 days or a week. That's all. We just get the pictures of a week pictures. How about we collaborate with scientists? When we go to the field with the scientists, they can tell many things that we probably don't understand. We see the for example, we see the bird nests. They probably can tell why this bird nest is bigger than usual, for example. That's a story that only scientists can explain to us as journalists. We know many things, but not in depth. And they know exactly. Another collaboration is with the citizen science. Ask the scientists to develop citizen science. Ordinary people doesn't have to be has a degree. They only have to know the indicators of climate change. Something changes in their community. They can report what happened in their community, what happened when the dry season is longer than usual, what happened with the food supply, what happened with the kids that the parents cannot pay for their school. They stop. They helping their parents working. That kind of social information and economic information is less reported as the impact of climate change. That's two things that I think we can apply in the next century or now. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And we move on to Napat for the answer.
All right, thank you very much. Actually, I really agree that like it depends on like who you want to tell the story. Like for example, like I work as a I do master as well. So like sometimes I have to like report as like in terms of academic paper, but like the way I do is like how can I translate those academic paper or those text complex information into like easy digest information which appeal to people to understand the climate change story. If you look back like 5 or 10 years ago, is when we asked the people about the climate change, actually there is no word about the climate change like in the last 10 years. They only know about the global warming. When I ask about them, like, what do you think about the global warming or climate change? They think about the melting ice, but they don't know like the climate change is already affect their life already. You know, if I ask the local fishers, what do you think about the climate change? They think like, oh, the melting ice and the polar bear, but you stay there and like, did you feel like anything changed? Some of the communities say like, no, they didn't think anything changes. So my goal is to portray like what is happening right in front of their house. It's not like far from, you know, like far from like their personal life at all. The climate change is like happening like and it affects your life. So I think like different tools has different approach. So like it depends on who you want to tell. That's I think that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Napat. And I think I'd like to add on based on my experience working on the field and asking regular fisher folks about climate change and what do they know about climate change. They may not know the term, the scientific terms, climate change, but when I were to explain to them, like, have you seen more rain? Have you experienced more higher temperatures in the water when you check your current? And that's when they realize, like, you know what? Yes. And that's when I'll be able to explain to them, like, look, this is actually impacts of climate change. And that's when they're like, oh, now it clicks, because I understand that certain communities, especially vulnerable communities who are within the coastal areas, they're not really well educated and they live within their means. But trying to understand climate change, yes, they are very aware that this is happening. They know that this is happening, but putting the right words to it is quite difficult for them. So I think this is where reporters like you and I, Napat, like Biena and Imelda, this is where our responsibility comes to explain and tell the story in the most simplified and easiest manner. Not only where scientists be able to understand, it can be a fisherman who would read up a story and even watch it on TV, be able to understand. I'd like to thank all of our panelists with me today, Napat, Imelda, Biena, and Harry. This has been a very illuminating discussion, and we are now opening the floor to some questions from the audience. I'll open up the Q&A, and there is a first question. I don't think it's a question, I think it's a statement. Climate change reporting through the health lens as well. And I think Napat, you would be the right person to actually speak about it in a health lens, because you mentioned that you covered a community that lived at the coastal area next to a landfill. And we know with landfills, there would be health hazards and health risks once this area is inundated and this area just floats out into the community. So can you share a little bit on your experiences on any possible health hazards when it comes to reporting on a climate angle and the climate reporting perspective?
In terms of health, absolutely. Let's go to the bigger picture, like environmental issues. So if we say like climate change affect like to the people, we cannot say in like it affect directly into the people, but like it's one of the factors that affect people life. Like not just really the southern part of the of the landfill, but also in the northern part of Thailand as well, where they have like PM 2.5, the pollution, something like that, because of the agriculture there. So some of the, let's say, community has to burn the forest or deforestation, or like to burn the cornfield, something like that. It totally like affect people's health, which cause like like cancer. So this is how it affects people as well, and they still have like reporting in this section already, but like as like we still need more report on this angle as well, because it affects like human life directly. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And we have a next question. The question is,
sorry, Ushar.
Yeah.
If I may add, because the question is asking about the role of health professionals in climate reporting. Very briefly, I think we are seeing momentum in recognizing, of course, the role of health professionals in highlighting the impacts of climate change. For instance, maybe journalists can interview them, highlight their activities or their research more, looking at the impacts of, for instance, in-depth report on the impact of coal or medical waste, for instance, and of course, highlighting the role of the health professionals by interviewing them. And I think one good resource in Asia is the Health Without Harm, and I think Pat's Olivia, who is a communications officer here, is a very good resource to that. So I think we need really to highlight more the role of health professionals in linking climate reporting and health as well.
Thank you for adding that on, Imelda, because I think a lot of people don't realize that with climate reporting, it's not only just environment or biodiversity, it has a bigger umbrella over it, because it also impacts businesses, it also impacts health and life and livelihoods. So thank you very much for adding that on. And now we move on to our next question. Would like to know how you see the role of health professional. No, we've already done this. Okay. The next question would be how to show and amplify. How do you build a rapport with your subjects when you have I think, limited time or resources? You can't push them to tell your stories, but open up. I would like to know more. And I think this would be for Biena to answer.
Well, for me, I guess, you have to know your why. You have to go back to why you're doing the story. Are you doing the story because you want to expose something? Are you doing a story because you want to tell the story of the community? Because if you want to tell the story of the community, it's sometimes easy to be, just go to that place and basically fire away with your questions. But sometimes as journalists, we also have to understand and respect the boundaries of our subjects. We also have to work for their trust, to gain their trust. And we also have to think of sometimes compromises. Will your story actually endanger the subject? That's why they're not opening up to you. Will the story will benefit your subject if you are able to publish it? Basically, you have to take time. It's not so much on, you're saying about, of course, sometimes there's limited time. You only have like maybe 2 days in that community, but you have to show your sincerity. You have to show them that what you're doing is beneficial to them. We had a similar thing recently wherein we wanted to report on a community badly affected by climate change, and then they told us they don't want to be interviewed anymore because they feel like they're being used by the media to show what climate change is, but nothing is happening and nothing is changing. You have to understand these realities, because for us journalists, it will be just a 2 day in like a day in a work, like just 1 day or 2 days of our lives. But we have to understand that what we are reporting is their day to day. What we are reporting is their realities, and we have to have that kind of sensibility, and we have to make them understand that why. Basically, I go back to what I said a while ago. Like, you have to make them understand your why. Why are you doing this? Are you just doing this because you want a good photo, you want a good visual, or you want a good you want a good subject? You have to let them know that you have their interest in mind, that you are doing this because you want to tell their story and not to, for lack of a better word, exploit them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing the realities of being a reporter on the ground, because it does come up. You feel like you're just making use of a certain community to get a story, but it goes beyond that, really. It comes with being compassionate and understanding their woes and what's impacting them the most, and try your best to actually give back with your story and not just a byline for yourself. We've got a couple more questions. We have the first from John David Moncada. He said that I'm very much interested to start doing science communication through science writing, like writing about topics in relation to climate change, say, for example, about giant clams in the island province of my mother's vis-a-vis climate change. I have a background in development journalism, but all my career, I'm a faculty in a science and tech university. Other than giving it really time to write, what other tips can we give to John in starting his career as a science journalist? And I think we can get any of our senior editors here to help.
That's for Harry, I think.
Yeah, this is a new something new for the science communications kind of. You probably have heard about the brand journalism. Have you ever heard about brand journalism?
Brand?
It is brand journalism. Brand journalism. It's the brand journalism concept is every organizations are media, and every organization can have kind of a newsroom there. How to tell the stories. NGO, for example, NGO needs communication, the environmental communication expert or science communication expert that can help them telling stories better, and how you manage the information that the organization have, how you tell the stories with multiple with video, with audio, with the text and everything, and what kind of outlets that you share the story. You need expert on science communication or environmental communications, and journalists also has a expertise on doing this brand journalism. This is something new, although it's already 2014, but the practice is just now more people knowing about brand journalism. So John, if you would like to know more, you can search about brand journalism, then you can apply it by yourself. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for sharing your insights on that. I think we have two more questions here. And the first is, climate change is a political issue. How can journalists include the angle of politics in terms of reporting? Who should be accountable? And this question is from Ayi Kairio. Yeah, include the angle. Yeah, how include the angle of politics when it comes to reporting limits?
Hi, Ushar. Before we move on to Ayi's question, I just wanted to give a tip to John Davis on having a head start in climate reporting. I think some people are very overwhelmed with climate change reporting because there would be science, there would be research, but sometimes you really have to maybe start small. I think for you, what you can do is for you to start small is think of what your medium would be. Do you want to use your Facebook account, your Twitter account, your Instagram? Do you want to use photos? Do you want to write articles? Start small, and then you will get the hang of it. You would see that your friends are already engaging with what you're doing, engaging with what you are putting out, and again, a shameful promotion. Climate Tracker and also Earth Journalism Network and Pulitzer Center is actually open to training citizen journalists. Just be on the lookout when we open calls for trainings for not just journalists but also communicators like you. So definitely we will definitely be open into helping you to start out your career in climate reporting. But since I'm here already answering that question, allow me to talk about this very how do I say, difficult question of including politics in climate change reporting. Ushar would definitely be actually one of the person who can answer this, because in a recent fellowship with her, we had a very fruitful conversation on how to tackle politics in climate change in the political lens. I guess, and I think this is what I said, I guess we have to we have to be aware of the realities. We have to be aware that climate change is also a political issue, really. But we have to also protect ourselves in whatever the consequences will be. So our reporting should be foolproof. It should be unassailable. It should be well researched. Maybe Ushar, you can share a thing or two about the report, the report that you actually wanted to do before.
Yes, I think it is important. It is very important to link politics and climate, because at the end of the day, they are our policymakers. They are the one deciding the policies, and they are the lawmakers. Because at this moment, if I'm using Malaysia as an example, Malaysia just concluded the general election. And during the campaigning period, during the general election, youth, and including myself, has actually brought up the issue of climate vote. Climate vote has become a topic of conversation in Malaysia, and climate vote means you are seeking political parties or political personalities who take into consideration climate action in their policies and in their manifestos. So as we've seen previously in previous governments, it may have been, yes, we had action by when China banned plastic imports, and then Malaysia was very adamant to not accept plastic imports because has been too much in Malaysia. It caused a lot of, like, there was political will to take action in assisting and helping and reporting climate stories. And given that it's quite difficult to get politicians, specifically ministers, to give you answers, to give you solutions, or to tell you what they have in the long run, I think it is very important that we also bring in politicians into climate reporting, because at the end of the day, they are the ones in parliament, they are the ones who will be voicing out the voices of the people on the ground. And it is our job as reporters, as journalists, and as communicators to make sure that what we convey out there is factual. It has to be factual. It has to be accurate, and it has to definitely make an impact enough that a politician would care. So I think, like what Harry said earlier, focus a lot on the youth, because I dare say that this election, the youth was very, very, very interested in climate change and climate action in Malaysia. And in fact, I put up a video explaining different manifestos from different NGOs and different civil societies who have been requesting climate action in Malaysia. So I think it goes hand in hand, because it's the same: politics, business, climate, everyday life, everything is connected. And it is very important, because at the end of the day, politicians have more power and more impact when they go for a certain company, for example, that may have polluted a river. Like regular folks like you and I, we can tell the story, but with a politician who is able to take necessary action and bring this up in parliament, that's when you get acts like Climate Change Act being tabled in parliament, and then it is for the betterment of the rest of us in the country. I think that is all I can share for now on the angle of politics in terms of reporting on who should be held accountable. Everyone should be held accountable. It doesn't matter if you're a politician, it doesn't matter if you're a large company. If you have the facts, if you have the information and you verified it, everyone is held accountable. No one should be left out of your reporting, especially if this person has done damage to the community or to the area itself. So everyone is accountable, including reporters. Reporters need to be held accountable as well with the facts and data that they put out there. So who's accountable? Each and every one of us, even readers. Readers can read our stories. And if you see something's amiss, you could actually fact check and correct us. Because at the end of the day, it is a learning process, and like collaborative is important. Like you can collaborate with just someone in your community and you never know the kind of stories that you find. I'm going to move on to the next question.
Sorry, Ushar, can I add something on that?
Definitely, go for it.
Okay. Well, climate change has always been about politics. And I was just at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Well, at this international stage, as in the past COPs or Conference of Parties, climate change summits. Well, most of what we've discussed there are about politics really on climate change, but thousands of youth people have been actively participating to push governments to work together to agree to this, what is known now as a loss and damage fund that is political, and that is an early win for developing countries and small island states. But let's not dwell on that issue, because there are a lot of issues actually to be covered at big conferences like the COP27, and we can report or tell stories in a simple, non-technical way, non-political way. In every COP, there are dozens of simultaneous side events, for instance, on issues and topics on youth, women, indigenous peoples, negotiations. It's really not just a story. And there are a lot of climate activists, the climate, the rallies itself are a rich source of stories that we journalists can develop. And there were a lot of youth-led movements. So we are seeing a momentum actually from the youth who are trying to make their voices heard. And I think it's worth highlighting their participation, especially in your respective countries as well. So same is true with the participation of women, indigenous peoples, and I think it's not just the politics of climate change that we are wanting to highlight. So we should highlight the youth, women, indigenous peoples, and others in order for us to laymanize the complex issues of climate change and technical aspects of the negotiations.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insights, Imelda. I think we are running out of time. We have overshot the networking session, so we'll take one final question, which is a very interesting question, actually, and it would apply in our region specifically. From Yusmadi Yusuf, how can we reduce misinformation about climate by rural communities? How can we reduce misinformation? I think, can we get Napat to answer this question for us?
Yeah, sure. Let's say report the report. To tell them the story and ask about the perception of the climate change, all the environmental issue that they faced, and try to converse and to convince them by using the fact and to have conversation with them. I think that's the key to reduce the misinformation from the rural area as well.
I would like to add on, for Harry, given your very senior position and your experience reporting climate, how would you address misinformation within the rural community when it comes to climate?
Yes, most of the time misinformation that the community get is from social media network. So I think journalist stories also should share in social media. Not only journalists don't have to think that I have published my story in my media, that's all finished. No, it's not finished. You should share it everywhere, because especially the community, they don't read newspaper, they don't watch TV, they read WhatsApp, they read Facebook, they read all those social media. So your story should appear also on those social media accounts and share fastly through other network. That's the how you reduce the misinformation. I mean, of course, you share your true information. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. To any of our speakers, Biena and Imelda, would you like to add on this last question? How could we stop misinformation? How could we address misinformation on climate within the rural community?
Very briefly, I think it's just like fact checking everything, correcting the misinformation, disinformation, debunk those misinformations, and write more about the facts, about the science data, hard data, and maybe counter check everything, and through the use of social media as well.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing that, Imelda. Biena, would you like to add on to our final question?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, we've already gone into the age where everyone can create content and we cannot moderate it anymore. So I guess we have to go back to the basics and partner with communities, basically educate them on what climate change really is. And I think there's already a growing space in civil society groups doing that. But I guess we have to foster more cooperation and dialogue between journalists, scientists, and also communities for them to work together and debunking this myths and disinformation in social media. We are already in the age that we have to go back to look, it's nice that we can now meet face to face. It's because we really have to go there. We have to go to the communities and tell them what's wrong and what's not, and what's real and what's happening, because we cannot fight content creators. We cannot fight trolls with just putting out more content, because at this age we can definitely filter the content that we're consuming. Like, basically content now is a basis of consumption. It's not something that is not something that you is forced to you, like television viewing before, that you have to wait for a certain time for you to be able to watch a show. Everything is just on demand, and everything is just and that's why our work is very cut out for us right now, because we have to work harder, because aside from this information, there's also mistrust in media. Like, we are in an age right now that we have to prove ourselves. We have to make people believe in us, that we're trustworthy. So I don't want to end in a very pessimistic note, but that's why I want to say that still very, very optimistic, because of the enthusiasm that we're seeing in the youth right now, enthusiasm that we're seeing in storytellers and content creators, and trying to debunk this misinformation that's happening. But really, though, our work is just a tip of the iceberg of what we have to be doing, and hopefully we can do it. We can do more. We can build more dialogues and conversations like this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that final piece of advice with us, Biena. And together with us, before I end this session, is our panel speakers today, Imelda Abano, who is a Journalism Network Senior Content Coordinator for Philippines and the Pacific, Mr. Harry Surjadi, who is the Southeast Asia Coordinator for the Pulitzer Center Rainforest Journalism Fund, Kunapa Ushar, a photo video journalist and a filmmaker from Thailand, and of course, Biena Magbitang, who is the Climate Tracker Asia Regional Director. We've had this interesting conversation for over an hour, and I think not only did I learn a lot of things, I think a lot of our viewers have also picked up a lot of tips and understanding on climate reporting within the region. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank not only our panelists to come online and have this session with us, but also the viewers. Thank you very much for joining us and sitting in and listening to how you can report climate better in Asia. So that is all the time we have for this session. Thank you very much for joining us. And we hope you learn about the climate change journalism in the region and ways we can improve our coverage.
we empower and connect environmental journalists, newsrooms, and NGOs around the world. Join our growing network, climatetracker.org.